We are going to be busting some raw vegan myths today with Chris Kendall. We're going to talk about some of those here in our lives, so we'll just wait for him to join. In the meantime, you can always go to the link in my bio and go get the Ultimate Raw Vegan Bundle 2025 because it ends in 2 days. You only have 2 days left to get it. So go grab it now before you forget, and we will bring Chris live and then come back. But we want you to get the bundle because there's only 2 days left, and those 2 days are going to fly by. So please go get it. Hey, Chris.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good. How are you?
Doing good. Doing good. Having a nice little day here, even though we only got a few days left. The energy's high.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Energy is high and we are having fun. So many people are enjoying the bundle. I've seen so many people making recipes from it, learning stuff from it, which is what we're here to do. We're here to help people enjoy more raw and bust some myths.
Yes, let's bust some myths. Absolutely. And you know, I just got to say up front, I'm so excited because right now Camilla is making some of Raw Chef Yin's dishes right now, and another one from Mira for dinner tonight. So it's like we're doing this, then all of a sudden there's going to be food ready. Oh my gosh, I feel like the most spoiled Chris.
Oh my gosh, you are so blessed. I'm sending my love to Camilla in the kitchen. And thank you, Chris, for everything you do. You are such a light, and again, appreciate you so much.
Right back. Gotcha. 1000%. 1000%.
Thanks, Chris. So your contribution to the bundle is a really important one because there's so many myths out there. And not just in the raw diet, but like the vegan diet and even just in wellness in general. And it's easy to believe these things. So to begin, what are some of, if you could list as many as you can, what are some of the biggest myths going around in the raw vegan movement currently?
Well, I mean, obviously the ones I went into in my book, do we want to go with those, or do we want ones outside of that you want me to list?
Oh, you can list a few from your book and then some that you've thought of recently, because I know there's a lot.
Yeah, there really are a lot. I mean, within the book, you know, the supplement myth, you know, the idea that if you supplement anything, you're doing it wrong or you're bad kind of thing, you know. The mucoid plaque myth is really big, and even since I've put out my video, I've seen people seemingly doubling down on it, and it's pretty wild to see. But yeah, that's a really big myth that doesn't exist, and I go really in depth into it in my book as well as in a blog post and video on my website. Let's see, I'm just looking over here. Which other ones are the biggest? I mean, a big one, and I honestly, I almost hesitate to say, but to me, it's one of the worst myths out there, is the less is more. I kind of went into that a little bit in a recent video, but just the idea that, you know, you should restrict and eat less. And even within mainstream society, this is very much misunderstood and a horrible myth. And I think it really makes this lifestyle so much harder on people who are starting a raw food diet to tell them like don't eat too much, eat less. You know, it's like, oh my gosh, what are you thinking? Like, that's a huge one. It blows my mind whenever I see people still talking about that. Enzyme myth is a really big prevalent one. I think that's a really big one. Yeah, I mean, even I didn't really go directly, it's in a lot of these here, but like the detox myth that like, you know, you go through a detox stage and then you go through a building stage. It's like all this is happening at once. And yeah, maybe you're detoxing a little bit more at one point, but you don't have to do something specific just to detox. You know, you can just live a healthy raw food diet and your body's going to figure it out itself. But of course, go more into that in other ways. What are some big ones that jump out that I haven't really mentioned here?
Oh, yeah. I love that we're on the same page because it's hard to work within these myths because people come into it and they see these like fanatical claims and they're easy to grasp onto, but they're harder to work through because they're so fanatical and they're so extreme, and humans are drawn to extreme things. I mean, there's a reason clickbait works, right?
Yes.
But yeah, some big myths that kind of, in a way, I hate to use the word irritate, but they do irritate. Is you don't need sleep when you're raw. That's one that really bothers me a lot. Like, you know, people are like, no, I get by on 4 or 5 hours of sleep and I've got tons of energy. And I'm like, that's because your body's looking for food usually.
Yeah.
And yeah, the less is more one is definitely one of the ones that really, you know, I don't like
No.
seeing that one out there either. And like you said, in the mainstream, it's like the longevity thing
Yeah.
with the calorie restriction. I hate that they used calorie restriction in all of the studies and stuff. The wording is just not right.
No.
It's not restricting. It's
No.
eating appropriate. You know, like
Yeah.
it's not overeating,
No.
but it's also not undereating. It's
Yeah.
eating the right amount.
Yeah. It's maybe
And
less of the foods that are, not healthy for us or ridiculously high in calories and not really truly foods.
mhm,
And I know we both are privy to Dr. Rick and Karen Dina, who are also part of the bundle with their awesome resource in here, What I Eat in a Day, that goes, breaks it down, and really also paints that picture. It's not about restricting, it's about caloric optimization.
mhm.
And, even within those studies, like, because people say like, oh, but you should eat less. It's like, well, yeah, less than too much. You should eat
Yes.
enough, of good foods, right? And eating not enough ultimately means we're not getting enough of everything, So it's like, yeah, it's not a path to spirituality. It's not a path to better health. Yeah, sure, for a short period of time you can get away with it, and maybe in some cycles when your body's going through something, sure, you may eat a little less. But in the week, month, year, you need to be getting enough if you want to continue thriving, right? So that's a big one. And I mean, that's like a snippet of the entire chapter going into it, right?
Yeah, I know. We are so grateful that you have shared that because there's so many things out there that scare people.
Yeah.
Or, the whole like 100% thing as well.
Yeah. You must be
That
100%,
you must
or you
be
get,
100%. And like I do coconut aminos and
yeah,
nutritional yeast and cashews aren't raw. And when I first started, I would be belittled for including, a small amount of those things in my diet. Oh, you're not fully raw, so you're not, whatever. And it's
don't
like,
come to our
what?
party, Lissa. Don't come to our party. This is
Right?
the purity camp.
Oh yeah, the purity thing. And then from that stems a lot of like body dysmorphia and
Yeah.
eating disorders. And that is something that really is heartbreaking to see because I see
Yeah.
a lot of people fall into that. And I do see a lot of people who have eating disorder tendencies are gravitated towards a raw diet because it is cleaner and, whole foods and stuff. And you feel good eating it. But if you are falling into these myths, you can run into dangers. And yes, supplementation, I love that you talk about that one too,
Mhm. Yeah.
because it is important. We live in an imperfect world, and no
Exactly.
amount of perfect diet is going to do that. One thing that was, there's a few things that I've heard in the past that just kind of blow my mind. Two things that stand out really well. Number one is in the early days, I don't get it very much anymore, but in the early days, I would get a lot of people asking why I still wear glasses.
Oh, you should have cured that already. And why
I
aren't
know,
your
right?
eyes crystal blue? Your eyes should be
I
completely
know
blue
they
right
should
now.
be fully blue.
Yeah.
And that's another myth too, that your
Yeah.
eyes change color. Everyone's eyes
Yeah.
change color. And if they're not blue, you're not clean.
Yeah.
And like sometimes like your eyes don't change color. Some people's eyes get brighter
Yeah.
and that might look like it's changing. And some people might have a color change, but it's not mandatory.
No.
And when people come in seeing that, it's like if they do raw for like 2 years and their eyes don't change color, then they feel like they're not good enough or they're not doing it enough, or they fall into this gaslit bucket of like, you're not doing it right.
Yeah.
So that's really frustrating too. And the second thing that was probably the most mind blowing of all was my
Mhm.
ex was an amputee, and when he was a baby, he had both legs amputated. I had somebody on social media tell me that if he ate raw, he would regrow his limbs.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it is painful. It is painful. People expect it to work every single miracle, and that it's like makes you completely invincible and that you could never get a disease or sickness. And it's like, again, people are drawn to philosophy rather than reality. And
Mhm.
people are also drawn to fantastical claims. And in the social media world, virality is sometimes put above common sense and ethics, sadly, and maybe the people that are promoting some of these things, I would hope actually most of them, they really believe it because they've been sold a line of goods from other people who are doing the same thing, you know, and or they're reading an old book and they just, you know, oh my gosh, this is the gospel, and they don't really look outside of it and look at the breadth of experience of people walking this walk for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you know, and like, you know, they completely dismiss all doctors as like always quacks and always wrong. And it's like, life isn't that black and white. You know, if you can slow down and you have a wider view and you take nature and science and good old information and experience, like you're going to get a lot more out of it.
Yeah. Agreed. Speaking of like that wholeheartedness, I'm
Mhm.
curious, which myths did you believe in the past, like
Yeah,
with your whole soul, that you
yeah,
no longer believe now,
yeah.
that you've, researched and stuff? What are
You,
some?
you know, truthfully, I'm pretty lucky. Only two, maybe three
Mhm.
have had a issue with me. The first one that comes to mind is the supplement
Mhm.
one, because it wasn't that I was like anti-supplement, but I definitely had pride in not
Mhm.
supplementing. And I thought that I was better if I didn't supplement. And that also I was like, if I don't supplement, then it's a better mission and a better message to tell people, you know, like you know, so, and sadly, you know, I got blood tests at year 6, like 7, 8, 10. I got like 4 over that 6 to 10 year period, and my B12 steadily was going down, and eventually I became symptomatic, and old thoughts, like negative thoughts that I used to have, and like really anxiety driven, almost like negative, really negative, depressive tendencies came back. Started getting more lethargic. Um, yeah, it was just I was getting really mad at little things. Like a little thing would go wrong on my computer and I'd be like screaming at the top of my lungs, like stamping my feet, like just freaking out, you know? And yeah, I had to admit to myself I was deficient. I was actually clinically deficient as well. And so I started supplementing, and those in short order started reversing themselves. And you know, ever since then, 'cause now it's been basically about 11 years that I've been supplementing B12. And I'll admit I haven't always been on top of it. You know, not super consistent all the time.
Yeah.
But there has been times where it started to feel like, oh, you know what, it's time to start supplementing that again. And I would actually rather be a little wiser and be a little more regular with it for the next 10 years.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, Chris. It's a vulnerable thing to share, especially when that myth is so held by so many
Yeah,
people. And I
yeah,
like that you said that about the pride, and that comes into play a lot too, the confidence, the pride, and
yeah,
we wanna show that it works or
yeah,
whatever, and that can be damaging to people. So very, very hard to deal with. And I used to believe in that mucoid plaque thing too.
yeah,
uh,
yeah,
but that was before, kind of before Raw, and sort of like the first little bit of Raw. I
yeah,
was kind of like, oh yeah, maybe, but then it was pretty quick with me, where I was like, nah, that's not really a thing. But I did like the gallbladder flush.
yeah,
I did cleanses to get rid of it before Raw.
yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, after, really what it was learning about the gut microbiome. That was
yeah,
what really opened my eyes to it. Like I didn't really believe it in the beginning anyways, but once I started learning about the gut microbiome, how important our mucus lining is,
yeah,
and like it's home for our bacteria. It's kind of like their
yeah,
apartment complex. It's also food for them.
yeah,
If we are sick or whatever and we skip a meal or something like that, they can eat some of that mucus lining. It's
yeah,
like so important. And when I talked to some gastroenterologists, they were like, no, like people are stripping this away, and their gut microbiome like declines so much. And then also another reason why I stopped believing in it was because when I started talking about it, yes, I got a lot of people who were like with your video, people are like doubling down with, no, it's true,
yeah,
you know. So when I started sharing about it, I got a lot of DMs, which is, private message,
yeah,
that people on social media don't see in the comments. But I got so many stories of people who were like, I tried to do that and now I can't digest almost anything.
yeah,
Like they have damaged their guts so much believing these specific things, trying to be pure and
yeah,
perfect and all this, and now they're damaged. And
yeah,
I know some people, it took years to recover
yeah,
from, one of these protocols. And those are things that I see, and I'm sure you get tons of those too.
tons,
I
yeah,
see them, and it's sad because if these people, they're like, I never shared this with anybody, but they feel comfortable sharing with you know, you or I, because we've
Yeah,
talked about it, but they can't share in the groups about these because they get gaslit. They're
huge.
like, you're not doing it
Yeah.
wrong, you're not doing it right, or you didn't do it long enough, you
Yeah.
know? So it's like, it's really sad to
It
see.
is sad to see. I actually had to stop looking at some groups because there's some Facebook groups that are just like so over the top with misinformation that is painful to look at. And if you say anything against it, again, you're either just blocked or gaslit, and it's ridiculous. Again, it's like appealing to philosophy and old books that could be updated, still have a lot of good information, but there's certain concepts of it that are just beyond. And yeah, the same thing. I mean, really, the reason why I wrote this book is because in my consulting practice, I've been, doing this full time, 16 years with consulting, and I've seen so many people hurt from it, and I've seen so many people mentally, emotionally torn apart and in guilt and shame spirals, and and yeah, it's sad too in the community. People have passed away due to these myths, just believing so much that they need to get thinner and thinner, or that they should be fruitarian and green, slow down, detox, and all these silly things that really don't play out for longevity and the best chances of actually thriving. It's like I'm not looking for a raw food diet you can survive on, and I'm not super interested in the extreme exception of someone with some weird genetic abnormality. I'm looking at what works for the absolute largest amount of people, what gives you the best chances to thrive. And what people like me who've been, consulting, and you too, and people like Dr. Graham, who's been consulting people for 45 years, what they've seen happen time and time again, predictably, when you believe in these myths.
Mm. Yeah, it's so devastating to see. Why do you think it's so easy to believe these myths?
I think a big part of it is because when you get into a raw food lifestyle and you see, oh my gosh, there are complete myths around the diet culture, like we don't need to eat, 4 square meals a day with every food group represented, and we don't need animal products. In fact, they're bad for us. So like they see these things that like open their eyes and seem to the outsider like extreme and like fantastic, and like almost on that extreme, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. It's so crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So once they already have that, then they kind of get that conspiracy mindset where everything is a conspiracy and like every doctor's in on the mucoid plaque. I've had people say that like every single doctor is on in on it, like they want to keep us sick, so they won't let you know the truth about it. It's like I believe there is some conspiracies out there, but a lot of these are just misconceptions and an inability to really dig deep, or a lack of knowledge around it.
Yeah, I and the confidence too. You
Yeah.
know, when they're
Oh,
confident in it.
huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for
Mhm.
sure. When people are super charismatic, they look good, and it's sad, but often, not always, but often people who are promoting these myths, they might have been into raw food for like a year or two, like, and sometimes people who are brand new to it are the most like, outspoken. They're like, "Oh my
Right.
God, like I just found this out, and like check this out." And it's like, "Hey, it's well-meaning,
Hmm.
but sadly it is poor information that is spread, and it's really important, I think, to ground yourself with experience and be well read and look outside of just your little shutter box, right? And consider other points of view, because that's how you're going to learn the most, to take in as much as you can and brush away the stuff that doesn't really work.
Hmm. And yeah, there's so many fears out there too, where people, if they feel any little bit of fear
Yeah,
with the food choice. Another myth too that I'm not sure if you have this in your book or not, that cooked food is poison.
it's huge. That's a full one, the cooked food myth. And that's the second one that did affect me at some points, where it was like I thought that cooked food in any shape or form equaled bad, like, I mean, even beyond that too, I even thought things that weren't hygienic. So I thought like using a chunk of ginger was bad, and I was worse if I used it. Uh, there is so often, and I'll be honest, I perpetuated the thought that eating any cooked food causes a rise in white blood cells and a rise in,
Mm.
rise in like emergency response in your system. I've
I did
shared
that
that, but
too. I
yeah.
did that too.
But the thing that's amazing is looking into it, the fella who actually, which I go into that even more in the chapter, but the fellow who actually brought that information to light in the original stuff like that he's sharing, actually goes in to say like that like not all cooked foods do this, and even if you add some raw foods to a cooked food meal, then that's mitigated. Whereas again, like people, they like black and white, and they want to make a point, and they'll exaggerate to make a point sometimes, and so they like every cooked food. And You know, so like I've heard people say like any cooked food at all, like steamed broccoli will give you mucoid plaque and, you know, is going to be a huge detriment to your health. And you can't be truly healthy if you have even one bite of cooked food, you know. It's like, yeah, this just isn't factual. To me, it doesn't really help the movement. It instead makes a lot of people automatically dismiss us if they have a good amount of knowledge around them, you know, and it at the end of the day, I think it just makes us kind of look silly and like we don't know what we're talking about. And I think it's just really important to, you know, move through those things, to research more and to recognize that a raw food diet is freaking amazing. You know, there's a reason why we stick to it and why we predominate our diets with raw fruits and vegetables. It doesn't have to turn you into a superhero. You know, it doesn't have to grow limbs back. You know, there's all these things like that that it's just like, it is enough, you know, it is enough and embrace it for what it is. But people want quick fixes, you know, they want fantastic claims. And sadly, the way the whole, you know, social media kind of internet is set up is that that's what's rewarded, the more kind of viral, crazy claims. And, you know, you often see people that promote that stuff, their channels just boom, like they can just go super huge, super fast, you know, and like wide claims like as long as you do raw food diet, then you'll cure everything. Every disease known to
Oh,
man is curable. And it's like, come on,
that's
like,
yeah, that's one
oh,
that I am so frustrated with too, because and people also put all the weight on the diet.
at just diet, as long as you figure out the diet, then everything's perfect. I believe that at a point too. I really, and not even just health wise, I genuinely thought, I see people promoting this idea too, that as long as I was perfectly raw, everything in my life would be perfect and I would achieve my dreams instantly and I'd just become like a psychic like meditator and like, hey, it helps with all those things. It really does, but it's just one piece of the puzzle, right? And it's good to be realistic and to not sell people on false claims, because if they fall short of that, then they'll be like, oh, this didn't work. Like, what did I do wrong, and feel bad and guilty or shameful? Or they'll just dismiss it and be like, well, this whole thing's a sham then, you know? So it does get under the skin, and it takes a little bit to just breathe through it and then come back to trying to share information that is actually accurate, and be about topics, you know, because I think that's just important to always recognize this is about topics. It's not about individuals. You know, we may recognize some people that do stuff like this often, but it's not about them. It's about the information. And we're really hoping that this helps everyone upgrade the quality that they teach and share to help people more effectively and make this movement grow bigger.
Yes, agreed. I know we want it to grow bigger and we want more people to eat more raw,
Yeah.
get more raw into their life and not be so dogmatic about it. And I
Yeah.
feel like in a way vegans and mostly raw vegans are put on like this pedestal. And
Or at
if
least they put themselves on it.
right, yeah, some put themselves on it. But you know, like the people watching in, they hold us to like this super high standard of living. And yes, we choose raw because we feel best on it. It makes the most sense, and it's a great support for the body through every stage of our life. You know, planned properly and supplemented if necessary, and all this kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
when we're put on this pedestal, it's kind of like if a vegan gets sick, it's because you don't eat animal
Yeah.
products, right? Or if a raw vegan gets sick, it's because it's deficient, right?
Yeah.
Like there's these. So in a way, it's like society has made us want to prove these things
Yeah.
and want to do it without supplements or want to
Yeah.
show that it's possible, you know, with these extremes,
Yeah.
because we're put on this high pedestal, so we like have to in a way to
For
prove it
sure.
to others. But that is where a lot of the damage happens. And I remember years and years ago, Fully Raw Christina went on some trip and she was detained or something. I can't remember the whole story behind it. But she took a picture of herself on the airplane headed home finally after like a really stressful couple days. And she had been crying or whatever. And she posted this picture. And under the picture, somebody was like, "You're raw vegan. I thought you weren't supposed to have wrinkles." And I was like, that is just, it's so heartbreaking that
Yeah.
people will assume these things and, you know, like they don't take into account like we're humans.
Yeah.
We, you know, we get wrinkles when we scrunch our faces. We're going to get
Yeah.
old. We're, you know, and it's not a be all end all pure perfect you know, you're never going to get sick kind of thing,
Yeah.
or you're never going to die. Like, you know, when a raw vegan dies, everyone's like, oh my God, they were
Yeah.
raw. Why did they die? And it's
Yeah.
like, well, you know, because we're human and that happens at one point in our life. So,
Exactly. Yeah. No, the expectation and the standards, often they're not really, in my mind, from well-meaning people. A lot of times they're just trolls. You know, like I've had trolls on my channel, for example, say like, "Oh my God, like his hair is so bad, he's losing it all. His like, where's his hairline?" It's like it's the same where it's been for the last 20 years, you know, like try again, you know. And I mean, with wrinkles too, I think it's important to really note too that if you're carrying extra weight, you're going to have less wrinkles. So if you're like thin, which most people on a raw food diet are, you might actually have wrinkles a little sooner than some people. And
mhm,
if you've ever been overweight and then you get really thin, well, you might even have a little bit more, you know? And
yeah.
to me, this diet isn't about like becoming a Ken doll. I mean, Chris Kendall, right? But like a Ken doll, like, you know, image of perfection and like never having an issue ever in my life.
Hmm.
It's about living in a way that I feel the absolute best, where I have the best chances of getting through it with grace, where I can grow in compassion and connection to self, nature, and spirit, right? And it's like that doesn't have to be, you know, it doesn't have to be an unrealistic expectation that you're automatically going to become, you know,
Hmm.
the Dalai Lama. Although maybe that's not the best example, but you know what I'm saying, you know?
Yeah, totally. I know Watermelon Lime's like, how dare you age?
I know it's
Like,
just insane, right? I mean,
I
when
know.
I when I
Go
when I
ahead.
got hit by a truck and I broke my leg, I actually had somebody say like I probably wouldn't have broke my leg if I was on a raw diet. And it's like, yeah, I got hit by a truck at like, you know, 65 kilometers per hour directly on my shin bone with a bumper. Like, yeah, it shouldn't have broke, you know. It's like, and I even had someone too say like, what did you do wrong that you got hit by a truck? And it's like, oh my gosh, like really? That's like I don't think it works that way really.
Yeah,
But
I know. And it's crazy these ideas that people
yeah,
have on us and yeah, and that's what causes a lot of, you know, internal kind of stuff because it's like we have to deal with all these outside voices
yeah,
while we're trying to change and be different than the rest of
yeah,
the world on top of that.
yeah.
It's so challenging. And another myth too that I just thought of
Mm.
was along the lines of like it cures everything, but
Yeah,
people seem to not fully understand what the word prevention means.
yeah,
They think that the word prevention means never
yeah.
get, but that's not the definition of the word. The word prevent means lessen your chances of.
Yeah, think
So,
of condoms. I
yeah.
mean, you know, it's prevention, but it doesn't always work.
Yeah, exactly. So that's another thing too that I think is perpetuated is this idea that prevention equals never get.
Yeah,
Because you know, if somebody on a vegan diet gets a disease of some kind,
yeah,
all of a sudden it's like, oh, but they're vegan. They shouldn't get that because veganism prevents XYZ.
no,
But it's like, but it prevents. Like it doesn't
no,
mean that you will never get it. It just means your
no,
chances of getting it are much less.
exactly,
And then you have to take into account all the other factors in your life, like your sleep, your emotions, your movement, your all of that, right?
absolutely. Yeah, no, 110%, because it may give you the best chances and it gives you support, but
Mm.
you don't know if someone is, you know, getting good sleep or if they're always up late night looking at their screen, you know, like I am sometimes, you
Me
know, but I
too.
sleep in. But yeah, but you know, or if again, yeah, if they're in a negative thought spiral all the time and holding anger and resentment, and I mean, there is a common thread with people getting new into veganism that they're quite angry because they recognize the craziness out there with the animal industry and that it's not needed and that it's just absolutely horrible and their heart's broken. And I've met people who are vegan that are really angry all the time and judgmental of everyone around them. And everywhere they go, they're thinking about those things like, I can't believe they're doing that. And that smell, oh my God. And like, you know, just you can tell that in their mind is coming up nonstop. And you can't expect to thrive if you're holding anger, if you're holding judgment, if you're holding fear, you know, if you're stressing out all your stress hormones, you know, nonstop. Well, you're not going to thrive as much as you can. And it is really just a multifaceted approach.
It is. It is so true. We got somebody here um, who said something very profound, and I'm glad you mentioned this. People conflate heal and cure too. They say, I have a disease that will never be cured, but I am healed and living well. So that's something that's really important too, is like people think that, you know, when they're on a healing journey, they have to get to this level where they are cured or whatever. But it's like, you know, it's not going to happen to everybody every time in all cases for every disease. It's
Yeah.
like, like you have to take into account your past, your genetics, what's going on, where your body wants to go. And
Yeah.
a raw diet may not cure everything, but it definitely helps. It's better than, right?
Oh,
You know, so
huge, huge, and it offers you a chance to connect deeper and be more connected to yourself, to your family, to nature, to life in general. Like I had a consult once that had cancer, and it was too far gone. Like we recognized that, and it was more about coming to peace with that and using that time from a place of love and connection with their family, instead of being in fear. And you know that offered a lot too, because they in their final days they came into a way deeper connection with themselves and with spirit, and they let go of fear, and they felt so good because they were still eating a healthy diet, so it could clear up a bunch of garbage and make it easier on their mind and their body. But it isn't always about reaching a perfect state, and I think that's even with diet too. Like people think that I just got to reach the perfect diet. And like once I just eat, bananas and oranges and romaine lettuce, then I'm perfect. And like that'll be the best. And hey, that can feel amazing. And I like to live that way at times, right? But the only constant is change. And this lifestyle offers you limitless opportunity to try different things on, to feel what works great for you, and what may feel great in one season may shift another season. And I think it's important to embrace that dance and to be, patient with oneself, and at the same time experimental with oneself. Trying different things on, trying different foods out, getting different variety for robust health, and also just because it is a dance, it's not a destination.
I love that. Yeah, definitely. It's about enjoying the journey, enjoying the food you're eating. And yeah, it's super important to not fall into what someone else thinks is perfect,
What's up, Jonas?
which is,
Jonas in the house, 25 11 years of urban foods. Good work, brother. Hey, another big one that actually I didn't mention in the book, but I think is a big one that blows me away when people say you don't have to brush your teeth.
oh my gosh, I know. That's a crazy one.
Yeah, it hurts the soul to hear that information, and seeing people lose teeth and have just like dark, crappy teeth because of it. It's sad, and I don't mean to say crappy. It's just like it's really sad to see when people ruin their teeth because they believe in such poor information and don't take care of their teeth, or don't eat greens, or vastly undereat and just dive into their mineral reserves in their body because they're lacking. It's
Yeah.
all those things can tie together, and it's a sad reality. I mean, we don't need to be brushing nonstop every day with a hard bristled brush, or use like baking soda every day to neutralize acids because you had an orange. You can take a more relaxed approach, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
another big one.
Oh yeah, I'm glad you shared that one because that's another one that I've seen a lot too.
Yeah.
And like rinsing your mouth with water after every meal is a really great way of helping
Yeah.
with that too. Like just simple things that you can do.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, like they say our ape cousins don't brush. It's interesting that a lot of the primates would actually eat greens after eating fruit to remineralize their saliva. They just naturally knew that. And plus, they're eating a lot higher fiber
They are.
stuff that's kind of working as like a toothbrush, so to speak. The average North American, Canadian as well, because I remember a long time ago, they changed their website, by the way. They no longer say this, but when I looked long time ago on their website, they actually said 100% of Canadians will have dental issues at some point in their life. And if only like 0.5% of the population is raw vegan, then there is a problem with the rest of the people. Like, what are they doing that's causing this issue? And I think a lot of it has to do with really soft foods, not getting enough fiber, not, having that bulk in the mouth, the roughage, can really cause problems too. But yeah, brushing, it's so simple and it's so important to do. So I'm
Absolutely.
glad that
Yeah.
you
And
mentioned that.
on that point too, primates will use little sticks and like toothpicks and like pick at their teeth and stuff like that. And beyond that, that's just is very simply a appeal to nature fallacy.
Right.
Just because it happens in nature doesn't mean that's optimal. People like to generalize and take something like that and say like, oh, that makes sense. Like, but it's not really always the case. Not everything that they do we want to poop into our hands and throw it around, or You know, do we want do we
Go
want
up
to
and
eat some of our
sniff
own
other
poo? And
people's
like,
butts. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. There's a lot of things like that that just like it's good to be more rational and think outside of that. Like, yeah, take that into account. Like, I have a video where I talk about my 4 pillars, and it's like nature, science, experience, intuition, and experience isn't just my own. It's also taking on the experience of people who have been knee deep in the trenches, you know, for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, right? So it's like it's important to consider all of those. And if we just only focus on one and have blinders of the other, we're way more than likely to be falling for these myths.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like just like you, I've seen so many people damaged from those myths and then they regret it after. But you can't tell somebody when they're stuck in that. It's like really hard. And you know, like with your mucoid plaque video, you know
Oh yeah.
how intense people can get to continue to perpetuate the myth
You
that
know
they
what
believe.
works? You know
Yeah.
what actually works? Like you can't tell them, but if instead you just walk up to them, you look at them and you slap them in the face. No, I'm just I'm just joking. I would never do that.
Right.
I would,
Oh, someone says, what about the protein myth?
oh
Whew, what do
yes.
you have to say on that one?
Yeah, I go in depth into the protein myth as well. That's a full chapter. It's like six
By
pages of it.
the
Oh,
way, go grab the bundle, guys. You get
yes.
Chris's myth busting book so you can get all the juicy details. You only have
Yeah,
2 days left to get it. So go to the link in either of our bios and get it now. Okay, continue.
absolutely. So, I mean, yeah, the protein myth, it is a really big one. And the long story short of it is on a raw food diet that is predominated by fruits and vegetables with some nuts and seeds, we'll say a well-balanced raw food diet, as long as you're eating enough so that you're totally satiated and you're not losing weight and you're doing some kind of activity. You're like you're not just lethargic laying in bed all day because you can't be truly fit. You can't get everything you need if you don't move and create demand and also help your body go through all the processes with that movement.
Yeah.
But looking at those factors, it's actually pretty hard to not get enough protein. Like you basically got to be just eating dates. But again, then that's not really a well-rounded raw food diet, right?
Exactly.
Um, it is harder to do, and most people get too much on any diet, you know? So there are ways to boost it if you want. You know, some people think like if I'm working out, I must, you know, like start focusing heavily on more protein. It's like, well, not really. Like really the more rational way that nature provides the answer to and shows us, you know, and science also shows it as well as experience, is that if you're doing more activity, if you're trying to grow, you're pushing yourself, progressive overload, you're going to be hungry. You're going to want more total calories. And as long as you eat more total calories of the same thing, you're going to get not only more protein, you're going to get all of the other stuff in the proper balances to get more. And hey, on top of that, if you think you're like the 1% or you just like, you know, you work out harder than anyone ever and you need to get the biggest muscles that have ever been, I mean, first, muscles aren't found in the kitchen, they're found in the gym. So it's pushing at the gym and it's getting enough sleep and recovery, not overdoing it. It's a balance, right? Sure, you can add in more high protein foods, you know, like I mean, I love hemp seeds, you know, and I love mushrooms and I love broccoli and um I love lentil sprouts and I love peas and I love chickpea
Oh,
sprouts
oh my God.
and all these things are absolutely amazing, you know. And I know some people they maybe they're not drawn to some of those, right? Like, and I went kind of deep into like the lysine, leucine, because I've heard some people who've been doing a raw food diet for decades run into a little bit of issues with say skin or hair, and then when they started adding more lysine or leucine rich foods, actually seen some improvements because it can be a little bit low on lysine and leucine if we aren't eating, let's say like the sprouts, or we aren't eating any mushrooms, or we never eat hemp seeds, or we don't eat much seeds at all, we just really focus on fruit and greens. It can be a little bit lower in those, but you can get an adequate amount by just routinely consuming small amounts of things like sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, hemp seeds, mushrooms, broccoli,
All my
chia
favorites.
seeds, all my favorites too. And then
Yeah.
on top of that, they're like super rich in lentil sprouts and chickpea sprouts and green peas, which I love all of those things, right? And I think that trying all of those out and seeing what resonates in your body, and occasionally over the weeks, months, years, and seasons, play with them, you know, enjoy different things. Like people think that any one meal is going to like make or break their lifestyle. And it's like, no, not one meal is ever going to make or break your lifestyle. And by trying on different things, you'll see the things that support your lifestyle.
Mhm. Exactly. Oh, I love that you mentioned all of those things because there's sometimes those are demonized, right? They're like, no, we
Huge.
shouldn't eat those because, you know, I love fruit. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I eat a
And fruit's
lot of
great.
fruit,
Fruit's
right?
great.
Fruit is amazing and it's like one of our ideal foods. And I say one of because there's so many other things
Yeah.
that give us so many other things. Like, why can't we just open the door and have it all come in, all equal? We want to treat it as equal. And choline is another one. And I'm really
Yeah.
glad that Wendy talked about choline in her book. She has a book called Feminine
A good one.
Harmony in the bundle.
Mm-hmm.
And she talks about choline. And I noticed that some people can be deficient in choline. And when you are deficient in choline, it has kind of similar deficiency symptoms as B12 too, like neurological, memory, brain fog, that kind of thing. So choline, very important. And that's one reason why I believe that some vegans or raw vegans crave eggs,
Mm-hmm.
because eggs are really,
They're
really,
really
really
rich
high in choline.
in it. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're like, oh, I ate eggs and I felt amazing. And it's like, well, maybe because you got a huge dose of choline,
Yeah.
where one head of cauliflower gets you almost your whole day's worth of choline.
Yeah. And I
So,
love I love choline. No, I love cauliflower, and spinach is really rich in it
yes.
too. It's kind of funny. I remember Mick the vegan made a video about it, and as soon as you mentioned it, I couldn't help because he made a really funny part in it where was it Dolly Parton, like the song Jolene, Jolene, but he swapped it for choline, so it was like choline, choline, choline.
Oh my God, that's funny.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
it
epic.
was pretty well done.
I love it. I love it. We have two people in the chat asking some stuff. What are your thoughts on number one, the protein being pumped to women in perimenopause and menopause? Because I noticed that too. Being in perimenopause, all you see is like protein is so important. You need
Yeah,
so much protein when you're in
yeah.
perimenopause. And then also, if you could touch on the difference between low carb, high fat, and low low carb, high fat, and high carb, low fat. It's the difference, like
Yeah.
high sugar or low sugar.
Yeah. Well, being straight up, I haven't done a lot of personal research on perimenopause connected to protein, but I have talked with people like Dr. Graham who has, and I've talked to other people like his wife Rosalind
Mm,
Graham who has,
nice.
and they didn't express concern or the thought that you have to vastly change your lifestyle around it. If we're talking about mainstream society, I mean, they're nonstop promoting keto and South Beach diet, and then Atkins back in the day, like it's a routine of promoting high protein, high fat diets that end in disaster, So I don't really take the mainstream ideal of excess protein being better.
Mhm.
In most cases, when people are talking about protein issues as we age, it's usually related to hydrochloric acid production diminishing as we age, which means we absorb protein less efficiently. And usually, two people are a little bit less active.
Right.
And if you're less active, you're eating less food and you're getting less protein. So I think a lot of these things kind of have misconceptions, based around lack of context. And I always think that context
Mm,
is super important.
I-
And as I said, even in the case that in some individuals, because of their genetic ability to, break down or synthesize muscle or things like that, like there's variance. There's room for variance, but I think as soon as we start pushing and consuming things based on an intellectual viewpoint and not enjoying it rather than enjoying what we eat and incorporating more and being in a diet of abundance with this balanced approach, I think we kind of miss the mark. So but again, it's easy to add a little bit more if you're concerned. I don't personally have concern, and I'm sure that Wendy in her book, if she went into that topic, that'd be one of the better sources to go even deeper with her research in it.
Yeah, definitely. I know. And being in perimenopause, like I don't really have any symptoms.
No,
So I haven't really like dived too deep into it, which is a topic that I want to look into more because obviously I'm going through it.
yeah,
So I want to support myself the best way I can. One thing that I do, I don't do it every single day, but I'd like to have it as a daily thing, is to take raw maca powder, which
mm,
helps to balance the hormones, and it's
hormones,
raw.
yeah,
So yeah, so
yeah,
that's a
that's
nice
pretty
one.
tasty too.
Yeah.
Actually, one thing that I will mention is I have consulted and talked with more than a few dozen women who have went through it on a raw food diet and said like, I mean, of course you can't compare it unless you've went half and half, right? But who had a very easy time going through it, like it wasn't an issue. So I mean, to me that does share something, but I won't say that I know definitively every single nuance because it's not something I've really dove into.
No, I agree totally. I totally agree because, people will say like, "Are you experiencing any symptoms?" I mean, I'm 45. I'll be 46 in a couple months, or not a couple, well, half a year.
Yeah.
But I'll be 46. So I'm in that age range that is the typical woman is in perimenopause, because menopause happens around 51 to 52 in there. So and perimenopause is a decade before that happens. So if that's the age for me, then I'm definitely in it.
Yeah.
But I don't notice, like, I don't have hot flashes. The only thing that I notice is my cycles are a little shorter, but that's pretty much it. And with the protein thing, from my perspective, is when, just like what Chris said, when you are active, you're hungrier and you use more calories, so you need more calories. And if you're eating more food, bigger salads, extra smoothies, more fruit, whatever, you're naturally going to get more protein.
Yeah.
And it really is all about like the weightlifting and building it in the gym, and then eating to compensate for that. Because if we don't eat enough, our body's gonna eat our muscles, and we don't want that. So
Exactly. And I mean, that's the sad reality. That's another kind of myth that is often perpetuated, that, when you get older, you decline. You must decline. And yeah, of course, you don't repair quite as fast, right? There are, athletes notice that it takes a little bit longer to recover.
yeah.
But a lot of this, like, and again, I don't want to make things black and white, and that's why I want to provide the gray. Most of this, in the context there, that is missing is that it's really mostly due to people becoming less active, and just maybe they injure themselves, or maybe they've lost interest in pushing themselves, or it takes longer to recover, so they do it less often, right? And,
Yeah.
studies have really shown if you continue and you maintain, your activity levels and you do weight-bearing activities, you don't have to become osteoporotic, you don't have to lose your bone mass, you don't have to lose much of your muscle mass, you can still maintain a very high energy, high muscle tone, which is all really good and important for overall health.
Oh, I love that you shared that. Thank you, Chris. So as we end here, thank you for this. This has been really, really good. I love talking about this topic because it's not talked about enough.
Yeah, it really
It's
is.
like perpetuated, right? And then the problem is, like, we're in a way fearful to share this kind of information because of the backlash that this myth is perpetuated by. So then we're like, oh, like, we've researched this, we've done the talking, and we've understood this different perspective, and now we've shifted, and it's hard to share in a world where it's different. So someone's asking, what about the absorption factor?
Yeah, that's good. And I
Yeah.
mentioned it a little bit before, but tying it into this muscle mass and aging and stuff like that, most people on most diets are eating in such a way where they're diminishing their digestive ability over time, and they're lowering their hydrochloric acid secretion and just bombarding their body. I mean, increasing the salt, increasing everything, and just it to me, and from my understanding and research, it is as much or more to do with that than anything else. Whereas on the other side, when we're eating a fruit and greens based diet, I mean, that's been actually clinically shown to improve your digestion, to make your microbiome more robust, to increase your hydrochloric acid, which is responsible for breaking down proteins. And I mean, besides that, another factor is most people aren't, that are fitting that mold and are in the mainstream studies. And it's always important to consider that and look at, the funding of the studies and who's in the studies. Is it mainstream? Like, if we're talking about raw vegans, like, they're mostly eating fruits and tender greens, or that's a big part of the diet, which is free amino acids, which I was actually just looking at it because I've talked about this to other people, and I deepened my research into it. There used to be, or there still is, there's studies talking about the protein availability and absorption rate of certain foods. And you'll look at some videos and they'll talk about it and be like, but it's easier to absorb your protein from meats, and vegetables have a lower score, and this and that. And it's like, okay, where's the context? Like, what are we specifically talking about? What foods are we talking about? And, I was like, it doesn't make any sense that raw foods have a lower absorption rate of amino acids when they're free form, And so I actually researched it even deeper. and fruits have a nearly 100% absorption rate.
Wow.
So, you know, while you're not getting like you're getting between 4 to 7% protein from fruits, which is actually right in our niche. That's as much as we need, really technically.
Mhm.
Um, we're getting 100% absorption rate, whereas most people, if they're getting 80% of their calories from cooked foods or from animal products, they're getting much less of an absorption rate. So even if they're getting more protein and, you know, bros are getting jacked, you know, shuffling back their protein powder and eating nonstop, you know, broiled chickens and stuff like that. Well, again, like it may be more total protein, but that's not the most important part. The most important part is what you actually absorb, you know, and it's the same thing with things like spinach. You know, you might look it up on Chronometer and be like, "Oh my God, there's so much calcium." And it's like, "Oh, but how much is that held up by the oxalate?" You know, it's like the most important thing is what you're actually getting, right? So this is the nuance that not a lot of people go into, and people, even very well-educated, well-meaning people reading a few studies can be completely miss the boat on if they don't have that extra added context.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm glad you mentioned the oxalate thing too. That's like a big fear that some people have. And, you know, it's not, I personally think that, and I've done a lot of research on that one too,
Yeah,
is for the vast majority of people who are getting the stones, they are dehydrated, chronically
yeah,
dehydrated. And they're not eating enough calcium in
yeah,
general to bind, right? So that you need to eat extra so to compensate for that. But they're chronically dehydrated.
yeah.
And that
Oh, that's a
is
big myth
actually
too.
one of the bigger problems.
Yeah, and that's a big myth too. The idea that you shouldn't drink water and that it's a
Oh,
better raw food diet if you don't drink water, and you know it's really misguided, and you leave with people that are slightly dehydrated and have more issues, and yeah, then they start seeing sediment in their urine. They think it's because it's better, and it's no, they're just dehydrated. You know, it's a really silly thing. You know, but again, well-meaning, enigmatic, you know, passionate, charismatic, confident people say something, and you know, people won't look any further. You know, and I just encourage, hey, don't take what we're saying at face value. Do your research too. Look deeper, and don't just look into your little tunnel vision source. You know, like look outside of it. Look, you know, with a lot more. Just look a little bit more.
yeah.
Just look,
Yeah, I know
just
what you
look a little
meant.
more.
Totally. Yeah, I know it's like on the tip of my tongue with no like bias, basically. Like
Yeah,
let
yeah,
yourself be uncomfortable with the new information because it is uncomfortable when you believe something 100% and someone comes at you with, oh, well, maybe it's not that
yeah.
way. It can feel really uncomfortable. So another thing on the digestion or the absorption
Mhm.
thing is people don't chew enough
Oh gosh, yeah.
either, right? You
Yeah,
know, people tell me they're like, corn isn't human food because I see it in my bowel, and I'm like, no, that just means you didn't chew it.
yeah,
Like you
exactly.
have to chew your food if we want to get better absorption. We gotta increase the surface area,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, if you don't chew your leafy green, you might see a chunk of leafy green come out. And while it's true, if you have a higher hydrochloric acid content, you're going to digest it more efficiently. You're not going to just swallow a leaf of lettuce and it'll come out perfect. You know, it's like
Right. Hmm.
teeth are there for an absolute reason. Something I also wanted to mention on the oxalate as well too is like, yeah, I totally agree. Like people aren't forming stones eating fruits and vegetables and leafy greens. You know, we're talking about people eating, you know, completely different diets that are not really optimal, you know? And beyond that, you know, the other thing about it is that it binds to calcium and zinc to some extent, and some extent iron as well. But what has been shown as well is if you completely avoid oxalates, then you have less of the bacteria in your microbiome that actually helps convert oxalates into a harmless form and doesn't bind the calcium. So that's only a small amount, but what it shows is like most vegetables have some, like a little teeny bit of oxalate.
Yeah.
And so by doing that, you're getting a little bit and you're building up that microbial base. And then occasionally having higher oxalate foods, like, you know, like say spinach, like I like spinach. I have it on occasion. I don't do it like crazy all the time. And I wouldn't personally recommend anyone make it their staple
Hmm.
green. But you know, having that on occasion, if it's not an issue. It's not a reason to be afraid of it and think it's a bad food. It's just, you know, you don't want to just live on bananas and spinach only for months and months and
Right.
months. That's not going to be the best source of calcium because it will bind a lot of the calcium.
Exactly. And another thing too that we learned from Rick and Karen Dina, who are also in the bundle, go grab the bundle, get
Yeah.
all this kind of information. There's so much info in this bundle. It's awesome. $50. You only have 2 days left to get it, so go grab it. But Dr. Rick and Karen were talking about how the body actually produces like something like over 60% of the oxalates that are in there
Yeah.
through protein
Yeah.
metabolism, specifically animal products like
Yeah.
collagen and stuff.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So it's like you might try to avoid it, but if your calories are coming from animal products, your body is producing a whole bunch of it anyways.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
it's always going to be, it's the same thing with like mucusless, diet, and like I'm not throwing shade on that because I think it's an amazing, amazing book, and there are a lot of key concepts in there, but we'll never become mucus free. It's
Mhm.
you know our body secretes mucus as a transport medium. It's going to happen all the time. We can definitely reduce the mucus, and that's great, but uh, we don't want to overload and be stimulating or irritating ourselves all the time. But at the same time, yeah, there's just some misconceptions and missed context, and I just that's when it is tough. Sometimes when someone says a half truth without the added context, then it can really mislead a lot of people.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so true. And a lot of people, like you said, the half truths, like they'll say true, 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 not true.
Yeah,
And so because they've said a lot of truth in their presentation or whatever, then people automatically believe this not true thing because they're like, well, they haven't lied to us in the past. Why would
yeah,
they? And also with the whole like, old theory stuff, it's like if
yeah,
it's old and suppressed, then it's truth.
yeah,
Like people somehow believe that it must be true because it's old and ancient,
yeah,
or it's suppressed, which can
yeah.
be hard too.
Or I only trust my own experience. I mean, it's to me a little bit sad when you can't learn from some other people and have some trust outside of yourself. I'm not saying to trust every doctor or every study you read as gospel without looking at other things, but I mean, we're going to send ourselves back to the Stone Age if we only trust ourselves. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me.
It's true though, because and then that's one thing that I have an issue with, like intuitive eating, because if we don't learn about the foods that we're eating, how can we
Yeah,
properly intuitively eat? Because some people, I've met so many people who struggle so much, but they intuitively don't eat breakfast or skip meals because they just don't feel like it. But it's like, but your body still needs a certain amount of
true.
calories, to function, and it needs nutrition and it needs these things. Otherwise, you're going to get deficient in something.
Yeah,
So, the intuition, I understand, like we
yeah,
want to be intuitive, but we also
mm,
have to be intuitive with logic at the same
yeah.
time.
The brain's a great tool. The brain's definitely a great tool.
It really is.
Yeah, that goes into the fun, I was gonna say one of the myths, breatharian retreats. Can
Oh
you
my
believe? Can
gosh.
you believe there are breatharian retreats? It hurts my soul.
It hurts my
It's
soul.
yeah, it's
I
it's
didn't
it's
actually
so
think those were
crazy.
a thing, but I
No,
guess they are.
they are. I know people who've gone on them and stuff. It's pretty scary. But yeah, were you breatharian retreat where you get served food, and it's I don't know. Anyways, yeah, I go in depth into that in the less is more myth, and
Mm.
yeah, it's a sad reality that people will starve themselves thinking of purity or thinking of spiritual ascension, and you know lose this amazing gift that we have of physicality in this beautiful world around us. It's a beautiful place we're in, and it's so abundant when we come into the sweet and juicy and savory lifestyle, right? It's like it doesn't need to be one of restriction or denying oneself. It's a sad thing.
I know, it's so sad. And like that picture that you have in there.
Yeah, I'm gonna be posting that on my wall at some point here.
Nice, nice. But it's so true, because what we've seen over the decades
Yeah,
is when people get so restrictive to the point where I've heard some are even just eating avocado and lettuce and that's it. That's
yeah,
all they can digest. They go back to eating animal products
yeah,
because they've restrict themselves so much that they can
yeah,
no longer feel comfortable eating the fiber.
yeah,
So they go to animal products, which are fiberless.
yeah,
So it feels good because it's not growing their bacteria at
yeah,
all. It's growing other
yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
But they feel okay because they're not challenging their gut. And I think like we don't really necessarily understand challenging our guts, because We challenge our mind with meditation, and that can be uncomfortable. We challenge our breath with breath work, and that can be uncomfortable. We challenge our muscles with weights, and that can be uncomfortable. We challenge our cardiovascular system with jogging, and that can be uncomfortable. But we don't want to challenge our guts because a little gas is too uncomfortable, right? So, and then if you don't challenge your gut and grow your gut, you atrophy. And
100%. I couldn't agree more. And I think, like, again, I've said this numerous times, like people glamorize, our past and, like living in nature and, think that it just means like swinging from tree to tree, from perfect fruit to perfect fruit and a young tender green here and there. But in reality, there's an opportunistic reality when you're actually in the jungle of underripe fruits and not enough fruit and, hardier greens and vegetables and digging into the ground for roots and eating subpar foods, but all those can have some time and place, in the species diet, right? So it's like we're just dang blessed, we're dang blessed by all the variety, and to try and lessen the variety that we have and try and just eat like one or two things. You're totally right. It's just like atrophying a muscle to not challenge, you don't want your teeth to dissolve because you only drink smoothies all day. You don't want like no muscle tone in your cheeks. You're just like,
right, totally. And if we value biodiversity in our rainforests, then we should also value biodiversity in our guts. We don't want to monocrop our guts, with like, because it's really sad when people get to that point where they're just eating lettuce and avocado because nothing else. They can't even eat a mango. They can't even eat whatever because it causes them pain, which is really sad.
huge.
And you have to start from that point instead of going further low fiber. It's like you got to start figuring out a way on how to grow the microbiome. So,
Like this one comment I just want to mention briefly. And again, this isn't black or white. Like we're both champions of variety while at the same time enjoying mono meals at times, and if someone goes through a period of time where they want to just eat mono meals for a while, that's all right, but it's not a lifestyle necessarily, and it doesn't have to be the lifestyle, nor is it better than or make you perfect or this or that. Like enjoy what you enjoy, and if it doesn't work, well then branch out and try different things and recognize that there is a lot of variance and opportunity and variety in this lifestyle, and it can be really tasty and fun, and it can be for social occasions and special occasions, and it doesn't have to be a rule book that creates anxiety, fear, guilt, or shame. This should be a lifestyle of abundance, of ease, of relaxation, of fun, and something that we can share with others without making them think we're freaking nuts.
Right, totally. And also not judging others too.
Huge.
One as well, because I see a lot of people, like I said about the wrinkle comment on Fully Rock Christina's post. It's like keep that kind of stuff off. We shouldn't be doing that. We should be lifting others up and embracing it.
Hurt people, right?
Yep,
So it's just
exactly. And broccoli isn't human food, Chris. We're not eating human food. It was
no, that's another misconception and appeal to nature. I go into that in the hybridization myth and stuff like that, and it's a misconception. Don't eat broccoli. I'm sorry, brother. that's not one that I would go with.
Don't take my broccoli, especially my beef and broccoli from Raw Chef.
I'm having that tonight. I love broccoli. I absolutely love broccoli. And if someone else doesn't like it, if they don't want to eat it, you don't have to eat it. And that's the beautiful thing too, is like, you can eat fruits and lots of greens and focus that as your wish. And you can eat vegetables and focus on that a little bit more. I actually tend to eat more vegetables than greens, personally. I love greens, but I actually prefer vegetables, but in different times I've done different,
Yeah, I would say we do too, for the most part. Like, our salad base. You were really the one who kind of opened my eyes to the iceberg lettuce thing. Because
bending iceberg lettuce.
Iceberg lettuce. There's no nutrition, and that's the absolutes where people are like, "There's no nutrition in it." It's like, well, there is, but The only absolute that I think is like true is that there's no fiber in animal products and oil. That's really the, because it's fact. There isn't any. But when you're coming saying that like there's no nutrition in cooked food, or there's no nutrition in specific things, or we shouldn't eat this food because it's not human food, like broccoli or whatever, we can't digest anything if it's cruciferous or man-made. It's like, it's interesting, the kinds of things that people believe. But I love broccoli. Oh my gosh. And you're going to love raw Chef Yin's beef and broccoli. Oh my gosh. It is so good. Especially candlizing the broccoli. I'm totally using that all the time now. I'm just going to say I candlized it. And if people ask, I'll explain why. I love that Dr. Rick came up with that term because it's so good.
It is too funny. It is too funny. If that lives on, then wow, I'll be very, very honored. But I really do love it that way. And the way I look at it too, like with hybridization, like we have intelligently, in a symbiotic relationship with foods, hybridized, looking at what nature does by itself naturally for our advantage. It's like, do you really want to be scavenging all day, like all like scavenging and eating and grazing nonstop because you're eating foods that are like triple the fiber and less sugar content, and pooping all day? It's again, it's kind of that appeal to nature fallacy, and cherry picking information. It's not really accurate, and it's embrace it all. Embrace what you enjoy. Try new things. If something here tweaks you, maybe not twerks you, but tweaks you, then you may want to listen to it again and ask yourself why it's tweaking you.
Why does it irritate? What is it that's, if you feel uncomfortable, like you said, there's a reason why it's feeling uncomfortable. But and then the all organic myth too, like that you have to eat only organic, but organic is still sprayed to an extent with certain, approved sprays, or, like it boils down to when you feel stressed out or anxious or confused or fearful or anything like that, that's when you take a step back and ask yourself, like, is this, I need to explore this a little bit more. So we are so grateful, Chris, for you. You're just such an amazing soul. And again, we appreciate you. And anyone who's watching this live, if you want to learn more about the details of the myths that Chris shares, please go grab the bundle. The link is in either of our bios or in the description box below. If you're watching over on YouTube, go get it because it ends in 2 days. There's only 2 full days left to get the bundle. So go get it now, because a lot of people forget. They're like, oh, I wanted to get it, but I forgot. So this is your reminder. Go now and go grab it. And then you have until June 30th to download the content onto your device. Keep it forever and enjoy it forever.
I love it. I love it. And I would just love to say, I really hope this book and the bundle helps people relax around food, because if we're living this way to achieve the highest heights of vitality and better athletic recovery and hopeful longevity and all these kinds of things, anything that brings up around food more fear, shame, guilt, anxiety, it's best left at the door. It's like we're eating the most rational diet out there. We're eating the diet with the most nutrition per calorie out there. Like, if anything, we should be the most relaxed and most confident in our lifestyle. But I understand if you don't have the information, or if you've been fed a bunch of these myths, and that's why we're here. That's why we put the bundle together, to come together with a really streamlined, united message and package, that allows variance, but at the same time is focused on, an abundance of fruits and vegetables, and, variety, and, lower fat and oil free, all these good things. And, you can come away with a unified message that can really help you bring it home.
I love that. Thank you so much, Chris. Again, you are a gift.
Right.
Thank you.
Freaking back at you, Lissa.
Aw, thanks,
100%.
Chris. So yes, everyone go grab the bundle, and thank you, Chris, for joining us, and thank you everybody for joining in. And I saw some really fun hilariousness happening in the chat there, so I'm glad that everybody had fun with it. But thank you for sharing all that very, very important information. So we will see you at the next live, because we have more coming. So yes.
Love it.
Thank you, Chris.
You guys,
All
have
right,
a good
bye,
night.
everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.